Real quick, before we get into the show, I wanted to share a new service called Getita that Ken and I have been using that has made us over $10,000 in Amazon reimbursements. The service requires no monthly subscription, and Getita collects a small percentage of the money they recover for you. It takes less than 5 minutes to set up and works on all Amazon marketplaces. Go to Getita.com, Getida, and enter promo code FTM400. That's FTM for Firing the Man 400 to get your first $400 in reimbursements commission free. How much money does Amazon owe you?
Welcome everyone to the Firing the Man podcast, a show for anyone who wants to be their own boss. If you sit in a cubicle every day and know you are capable of more, then join us. This show will help you build a business and grow your passive income streams in just a few short hours per day. And now your hosts, serial entrepreneurs David Schomer and Ken Wilson.
Welcome, everyone, to the Firing the Man podcast. On today's episode, we bring in Pat Lum for the third time. We have known Pat for over 5 years, and he is a true expert on Amazon ads. Pat and his team spend over $13 million a year on Amazon ads. That's all they do, eat, sleep, and nerd out on this stuff. And now he's sharing a new Amazon PPC playbook that they have developed with the world. We are really excited for this interview. Welcome to the show, Pat.
Thank you. It's good to be back. Fantastic to see you guys.
Absolutely. So for our listeners that have not had the pleasure of listening to your previous episodes, can you share a little bit about your background and your path to becoming a PPC expert?
Sure. Yeah, no, I was just trying to pay for my college. I sold stuff online. Originally, it was actually a retail operation. I sold physical products door to door, wholesale in it. just trying to make it work. And then found Amazon as an online distribution channel, and I listed my products on there, did well, and then I just became fascinated with what was then, in 2016-ish, like the emerging sort of Amazon marketing space, and I just fell in love with just the marketing component, and so I started helping other sellers with that, and we founded, Asteroid X, my company, we founded in 2018, so it's been about 5 years now, and it's been a fantastic ride. Yeah, I just love the marketing stuff.
Awesome. Well, cool. So like David mentioned, we've had Pat on the show a couple of times before, and Pat's covered, I think on the first one, it was kind of like intro to ads and how to run those. This one, we're going to dive into a couple of little deeper topics, expand on those. And so let's get right into it, Pat. A lot of times, I hear this a lot, Amazon PPC top of search ads. Can you share with the listeners, are they important? What are they used for, and why or how are they different?
Top of search is a really interesting tool that I think most people are still underutilizing. I think of it like as an ethical bribe to Amazon, because most of the time when you're running ads, you could say, hey, Amazon, and this is through like the bidding mechanisms and the ads platform. You could say, hey, Amazon, I want to pay 50 cents per click and no more than that, please. Like, please don't, because it doesn't work with my margins. It's no good. I can't afford more than 50 cents per click on each of my ads. Unless what you could do is ethically bribe using the top of search feature. You could say, hey, Amazon, I only want to pay 50 cents a click unless you can guarantee me, show up on the first page, and then I'll pay a lot more. I'll pay up to $2 a click. And you might wonder, like, why would any seller want to do that? Because it seems like if you spend $2 per click, you're just going to go broke real fast. But no, that's not what we've seen actually happens because of a weird dynamic. If you appear on the first page through, top of search bidding and you get aggressive with that, the click-through rates and the conversion rates are actually higher on the first page than if your ad had appeared on pages, 3, 4, 10, or on another listing, whatever. So your click-throughs and your conversions are going to be higher. So even though your cost per click is more, you might actually end up paying just a bit more, or maybe even on par to acquire that customer. Your cost to acquire the customer will actually be really similar because the clicks and conversion rates is higher. It's not going to work for everybody. You got to have a strong listing, obviously. But yeah, I've been talking to quite a few, high 6 and 7 figure sellers, and they love exploiting top of search for this reason.
That's excellent. And I think what we found, and this is an option that you recommend sellers like test on each different product. Like how would you recommend, like, where do they find this, and kind of how do you recommend like testing it to see if it works?
Test it on some of your big boys, your heavy hitters, because, it's not probably advisable that we don't like testing anything really with ads across the board. If it doesn't work with your best sellers, it's not going to work with anything under that. So maybe try that first, just also for the sake of economics. For people watching watching this in the future, we're recording in April 2023, and the economic conditions are less than desirable. So yeah, don't go crazy with off a search. Not legal advice. Just
Very nice. Now, Pat, your team manages some pretty unique accounts, and can you share with us some details on the account you've mentioned that does $350K a month in ad revenue, and just kind of the general strategy behind that, and your thoughts there?
Yeah, I wanted to bring this to you guys because there was an account I saw recently. Yeah, so as you said, $350K a month ad rev, and that's not organic. That's not including organic sales. They're well over $1 million a month on the Amazon store. But what struck me about the way that they were thinking about stuff and the way they were thinking about making money on Amazon is it was stupidly simple. Like, it's almost like the more advanced you get, the more dumb and stupid your advice sounds, because it's just stupidly simple. So it's like, I would describe their ad strategy as pointy, by which I mean, like, they really only wanted to focus on advertising a few top products and really allocating like most of the budget to those, say 80% of the budget to our top 3 to 5 SKUs. Like, it wasn't much at all. And then to sort of put a finer point even on that, amongst those, select few products that they were choosing to push, a small number of keywords even amongst those products they were pushing. Like, so it's really like a sharp point on the product selection and a sharp point again on the keywords used to advertise those products. I think a lot of times people make a mistake where they go too broad with the ads. They want to bid on this term, all these terms, auto campaigns, manuals. You probably just need like 10 or 15 real good terms that are high traffic, high relevance to the product that you can drive ranking for. And that way, everything just seemed really pointy to me. I think that's what and they also use this top of search function. Yeah, it's just, it was really concentrated, I think, because they had enough data by then to know where to put the money.
One quick question, follow up on that. Was there anything to like, are they going after keyword ranking, or are they looking at keywords that just convert really well? And are the products that they're targeting, are those that are most profitable, or just happen to have the highest converting keywords?
Again, on a really simple policy where they wanted to maintain a 10% TACOS, and then the ad budget could be whatever, they'd scale the ad budget up as high as it could go, as long as the TACOS was at 10%. And for those who maybe are uninitiated to this term, you got your ACOS, which is your ad spend divided by your ad revenue. And then you got your TACOS, which is a similar metric, but it also accounts for the ranking of the keyword. So the TACOS is the ad spend again as the numerator, but the denominator is all of the revenue that you get. So both from ads and organic. So what they were saying by saying they wanted to hold the 10% TACOS is, we're going to spend, say, for every $1,000 that we spend on ads, we're going to want to make $10,000 in total top line revenue in the business, and then we can scale up that ad spend accordingly. So $12,000 in ad spend, $120,000 top line rev, whatever it is. Yeah, so they wanted to scale up 10% TACOS, super pointy, and there was just a few rules that they were using. It wasn't anything crazy.
Another thing you mentioned was that $350K in ad revenue, and then over $1 million in organic. So just rough numbers, 30% PPC revenue. That's something that we're looking at on a weekly basis, is what is our proportion of PPC revenue to organic revenue? And I'm curious is there a point where things are out of balance? And if they are, how do you react to that?
It's a good question. I've always seen it happen in like life cycles. Specifically, you could probably map this to the life cycle per SKU. Like, when a SKU starts out, it's really normal for, a 60-40, even 70-30 split in favor of ad sales, like sales coming from ads. But then as it matures, you probably should, you're losing too much money on ad spend if a product is 70-30 revenue coming from ads throughout its whole life cycle. So you probably, a mature product, you may want, anywhere from, 10 to 30%. I would argue if you have a product that's just sitting there and 95% of the sales are organic, you might want to put your foot on the gas a little bit more and kind of see if it can, how far you can push that thing. But yeah, anywhere from, 10 to 30% for a mature product, but I've seen, closer to 40 to 50 when it's sort of on its way up. That's assuming you're using Amazon ads aggressively to rank the product.
Okay. In terms of, so on this account, they'll spend as long as they're hitting that TACOS number, they're just have kind of an open wallet. Are you guys looking at, when you're managing that account, because obviously there's this whole organic component that feels a little bit out of your control, right? Are you looking at ACOS on that? And where does like break even point? So for instance, let's just say they run a 30% profit margin. How does that factor in?
We're looking at, unfortunately, Amazon doesn't tell sellers, okay, this is how many sales you got from this specific keyword. So you sort of have to, that's really really annoying. Jeff, if you're listening, please fix this. It's so we sort of have to extrapolate, are our ad sales for keywords, is it increasing the ranking? And we do that through rank tracking. There's all these software suites that you have now. You can use those to track your keyword ranking, by the day, and you'll see where you are, and you can sort of extrapolate, okay, we have this. A way to get control over this would be to run a sponsored products manual campaign with just the one keyword in it. We're a big fan of this, where you just have the one term inside. So that way you can moderate the bid, the budget, and you're rank tracking it in a software. You can kind of start to piece out where all that stuff, how it all goes together. I don't think that was quite your question, though. I think you're wondering more about the margins in particular.
Well, it's something that we run into where I would say like one particular brand that we manage tends to have like a 30-35% break even point. And so we, prior to ads, so that would be sale price minus FBA minus referral minus unit cost minus shipping and tariffs, like what we call fully loaded cost. One of the strategies that we've employed is kind of target an ACOS around that break even point. And so I was curious on, with this brand that you're talking about, are you more focused on ACOS or on TACOS?
Yeah, it's all in on TACOS, because TACOS keeps into account the ranking. It's not a bad thing at all to focus on ACOS break even, but it does localize the problem just to the ads, whereas you could be leaving some money on the table if ranking was just being driven up like crazy and all you had was an ACOS that was only high enough to break even or make a little bit of money on the ads. You could be leaving money on the table from a TACOS perspective, even though it works from an ACOS perspective. You could. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just not the most aggressive thing. Like if top line was really the goal and maybe we had some ambitious like growth plan for the year or something, we may want to look at, okay, could we actually have a higher than break even ACOS, but does the ranking justify it? And if it does, we should do that, maybe. So that's why TACOS instead, but doesn't have to be.
Sorry, we're really to our listeners, we're really going deep on this, and I think to anyone that's managing their own PPC, this is, or working with somebody, I mean, this is super, super helpful. Last question, and then we can move on. That 10%. So when that company was formulating their budgets, where did that 10% come from? And to our listeners, like when they're trying to kind of figure out, well, what should my target be? What am I aiming at? What would you recommend?
I'd have to ask them why they set the 10%. That was like an internal sort of business mandate. If I had to guess, I would guess that it leaves enough room for like some months we're going to be over that, and it just leaves enough kind of wiggle room so that no month is extremely unprofitable. And it's a nice clean number. But I think and it probably also works with the margin. Like you have to understand what your profit margins are on most products. It's tricky too, because as a 10% TACOS like blended across all the products. So it's not like each product has an identical profit margin that you can account for. But I think maybe 10% works universally across the product lineup. It's nice and safe. It's not 5%, so you get a little bit aggressive there, but it's not 15 to 20 when you would probably truly start to cut into some margins on some products. There's no like scientific reason why it would have to be 10% versus like 15, for example, or something like that.
That's awesome. Anything else on that, Pat? Or
I think the takeaway from some of that stuff is just that it's much simpler than I would have thought in terms of the plan, right? 10% TACOS, focus 80% of the spend on 20% of the SKUs, and focus 80% of the spend on 20% of top keywords, top of search. They like product ASIN targeting, like the product targeting works. So just before we hop off of this, something really interesting is that there's this debate over like defense terms. Have you guys defense PPC campaigns, right? There's this big debate, and I don't think it's been resolved in years. So we're here to resolve it right now. These guys ran a test, okay, and it's a pretty well-known brand. I would love to say the brand name, but I don't think I have clearance for it, so I'll keep it to myself for now. It's unfortunate, but so they have a pretty well-known brand, gets a decent amount of search volume on Amazon every month, right? And so they sort of were in the mindset that I have to protect my brand. I have to, run ads for my own keywords, or else my competitors are going to do it and they're going to steal all my sales. And I think that's the general sort of discourse that goes on there. But however, they ran a 1-month test where they shut off all of the branded terms and nothing happened. They do these days, they sort of, flipped slightly back into the other direction where they'll have one sponsored brand's banner. Those are those banner ads just at the top of the search results for their brand, just to say, hey, here's the brand. In case you were looking for it, here's us definitively, like the knockout punch up top. But we're not going to bother sponsored products advertising for a bunch of our terms. The people who are searching for our brand name probably want to buy our thing and not, whatever competitor name X. Like even if they do interject a little bit in the ads. It's not, and so they improve margins, that way. And that ad spend can be allocated towards non-branded terms, like getting new customers into the business. It's alluring because if you run for ads for branded terms, your ACOS is going to be just chef's kiss incredible. It's going to be, 3%, 5%. But so it produces a good ROAS, like a return on ad spend, not necessarily going to grow the business. So that's another kind of counterintuitive decision that they had made, and it's paid off. Yeah, there's a huge debate about this.
David, go ahead. Do you have a follow-up on that?
Before we move on from in the weeds PPC, I do have something. So Ken, do you have a follow-up on this?
No, I was gonna spin into a follow-up question.
So Pat, we've been talking a lot on this show about expansion, international expansion. In fact, we are huge fans of Amazon Canada and the profitability and less competitive. And so that's been a great move for us, Amazon Canada. And so my question to you is, when you enter into a new marketplace, are there any general strategies that you would employ? And I'm going to say like specifically like English speaking. So like Canada, UK, if you're primarily focused in the US, but then that's how you expand. Any strategies to help there with hitting the ground running?
This I'd have to check, but do you know if were you guys able to transfer your US reviews onto the Canadian listings from the first day? Like, yeah, right. So definitely if you're selling the same product, there's no need to start from scratch on the review front. So that's like a nice little head start, nice little boost there. If you're US expanding to Canada, especially that specific expansion, I'm Canadian, we don't talk so different, right? So we're going to use a lot of the same keywords to buy your stuff than the Americans are. We're going to have a few more French searches, which is sort of a quirk of the market because we have Quebec, which is a purely French speaking province, whereas the US is going to have more Spanish searches and that. So that's a little bit of a regional difference. But no, for the most part, I would just say set your expectations in accordance with the population numbers. So we have about 10% of the US population. So it's not going to be, I think we're at 31, 32 million, something like that. And I know the US is over 300 million, just really roughly. So, temper expectations where I don't think it, especially early days, it's not going to match US sales, but it's going to be a nice little revenue boost and certainly less competitive. Right? So
a little more profitable is what we've found, is that you can price a little bit higher and due to the exchange rate, we've seen a little bit like 5% boost in profit over US. Now really? that may just be our brands, and we also are still getting pricing dialed in. So maybe we went in high and that's working. We're big fans of Canada. We have one particular brand we were just talking about this morning that 30% of overall sales is coming out of Amazon.
Oh, really?
Or Amazon Canada.
Why do you think that is? We've seen an average of at best 15% lift, something like that. So that's good. That's a really successful expansion.
Here's my theory. This particular brand's in the pet space, and I think Canadians, they love their pets.
How long has it been in Canada?
So we were doing NARF for 3 years.
Okay. Yeah.
And so we knew we had some traction, but we've probably quadrupled when we got out of NARF and just have put stuff there on
6 months maybe.
Yeah, 6 months.
It's probably been there 6 months, and it's hockey sticking. Like it's not really slowing down, and so it's a. Yeah, we've seen 10 to 20% on some of the other brands, but this brand is at 30 and still going.
Wow.
So we like Canada lately.
That's pretty darn good.
Yeah.
Okay. And you found that even after the exchange rate, when all said and done, you can charge 5% more for the products?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
That's our theory, and that's how we have things priced. Now, whether we bump those down and see a bump in volume, it's like the other gymnastics of running these businesses is trying to dial in your price.
How would you rate the competitive landscape when you were thinking about Canada and you were looking at what was already there, like the offerings already for sale on .ca? Were you like, oh, we could take these guys for sure, they don't have, or were you like, it's going to be a little stiff competition?
I would say our strategy was turn on NARF. That was literally the easiest way to bump your revenue. And we saw some traction there. And that was with 2-week shipping time. And we were like, well, things will only get better if we can get that Prime badge. And we did. Our conversion rate almost doubled when we got out of NARF and into Canada. And I would say shipping out of the US is fairly reasonable. Shipping out of China, we've got longer lead times, closer to that 70 to 85 days with the suppliers that we're working with, which is fine. You just plan ahead for that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Well, it's just because you sell in the US, you know how competitive it is for that brand in the US. Did you find that the competition that was already selling in Canada before you got there, how much weaker was it?
Significantly. Okay, I've got a good example of this.
Okay.
So I was just looking at this last week. We have a product where in terms of a moat of reviews, I think we're probably we're in the top 10, but maybe 8th or 9th place. We're second in Canada second in the UK, and second in Germany. Behind
Yikes.
There's one. And so we like that. We can go into these markets. We've got, a moat of reviews. And I do think that that's something that's considerable. And so we've had a guest on our podcast, Adam Feinberg, and he's talked a lot about launching in when he's not super confident about performance in the US, he'll launch in the UK. Even though it's a smaller marketplace, he says there's less players and tends to be a little bit less competitive. I'd say we're dipping our toe into those waters, but we're still early on enough that I can't speak to it fully what our results are.
It's cool because I think in episode 150 that we did about 5-6 months ago, he said the jury's still out on Canada. Let's see. So that was a successful test.
Cool. Yeah, definitely fans of Canada and excited to see this. Excited to see the ceiling on that, and then start playing around with pricing and conversion rates and stuff. But huge fans. Want to pivot a little bit, and now, and we were talking earlier, Pat, you had mentioned, we kind of went deep into like this TACOS strategy, and that's kind of like a pure like profit play, right? Like you're really managing profit when you're targeting TACOS. You're looking at overall profit of the company, which I think is very, very smart. And as we move into a recession, or what people call a recession, as we go into this, the rest of 23, Pat, what are some tips on how to prepare your Amazon business for a recession, or how to tighten it up a little bit? What can you do on the advertising side and maybe on the company side?
The first thing I would say and I don't think I know you guys are really diligent with the numbers. I would just say for folks, sometimes Gen Z has this saying like the math doesn't math, or the math isn't mathing. Sometimes the numbers don't make sense to sell a product at all in the first place. You get all the revenue you want, but it's not going to generate a profit. And typically, and I think David actually mentioned this on the last pod, but it was he was saying how generally as a minimum, you want a 4x markup on landed COGS. If it's costing you, $10 to make the thing, you got to sell it for at least 40 to make the economics work, preferably more. I mean, if you could. So just not jumping straight into ad tactics and listing optimization, all this stuff. Like some products don't have the built-in margins to even justify being sold on the platform, or you're going to have to raise the price to make it work. I'm always surprised when sellers actually do a profit analysis for the first time per SKU, and they look at how much they're actually making per product, and then they realize like, oh shoot, like this product does a ton of revenue, but I'm making pennies on the dollar, right? It's not it's Amazon sellers should not be in the revenue game. Like we got into this to make money, not have a 7-figure business that doesn't kick off any cash, right? And the other thing is sellers, it's like that those are your your earnings as the owner to pull out, and can't put food on the table with revenue, you can't pay mortgage with revenue. It's all this profit stuff. And if you ever wanted to sell the business, we've dabbled in these online marketplaces like Flippa and Empire Flippers, and looked at buying Amazon businesses and talked to aggregators. And whenever you buy an Amazon business, it's valued on what? It's not a tech company where it's valued on top line rev. It's valued on the last 12 months of profit. So even if you want to sell the business, like it's really just about the profit number. Yeah. So I think some sellers could reduce complexity and make their lives easier, even by cutting some products or increasing price. And I think there's a lot of, and the basic blocking and tackling of I think just negative keywords, bid adjustments on the regular, just making sure that you don't waste ad spend unnecessarily. When we meet sellers often for the first time, we're seeing, I saw one the other day was, they spend $10,000 a month on ads, $7,000 just spent for no reason. It's like finding money under the couch cushions, except you find $7,000 in there and you're not happy about it. Like,
it's kind of a good thing though, because now you can take that $7,000 and go make more with it if you choose to. So I see opportunity when.
Yeah. Well, you're a winner, Ken. That's what you see. But I think a lot of people get a little sad for a second, and then stages of grief seeing the wasted ad spend.
So we'll just so as we go back through there, reducing wasted ad spend, keywords, misspend, focusing on TACOS, trimming your catalog. If you have unprofitable products, just getting rid of them. Then you're not spending money on inventory and wasting ad spend. And so lots of different tips and tricks there.
Yeah, there's maybe an argument to be said about we all saw what happened over COVID. If you're selling during this time, that the essentials got prioritized. I think if you can at all, this is probably it takes longer and it's harder, but if you can be positioning certain products as more essential, or get into lines of product that are essential, I think you'll be more recession proof. People will cut in reverse order of sort of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? They're going to cut the vacations are going to go first, and then, the luxury, whatever. And it all gets down, and, and the last thing that's going to be cut is a bag of rice or something, So I'm not saying get into the rice business, but like if you have the money's in the rice business, okay, listen, rice, they need something to cook the rice with. Certainly it's a sort of related, but not quite. I am seeing a play recently that's working nicely. Like if you notice that some of your orders are coming from B2B, sort of business to business, people buying up a larger quantity of items, you can just make it easier for those folks and roll out a child SKU variation that's a 10 pack or a 12 pack or something. Just make it super easy to buy, get that high cart value going. It's not a bad thing.
I just saw an article that came out, Marketplace Pulse, yesterday or the day before. It was $35 billion is annual B2B revenue that Amazon pulls in. And so, a strategy we do is decrease a B2B price a couple bucks, 5%, 10%, give them something, and then add in some quantity packs if the product makes sense. Discount 3, 5, 10, just add in those discounts, extra 2%, 4% from B2B is a nice little bump.
Yeah, and don't increase your complexity that much. When you make those quantity packs, are you immediately sending something into FBA, or are you doing FBM for a while to test the waters on the...
Let me clarify. So quantity discounts. And so you can set, you can give a B2B price, and then you can also set a quantity price discount.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So not a whole different ACID.
Right.
If they buy 5 of this one, you give them 15%. If they buy 10, you give them 25. And so the FBA fee decreases by like 30 or 40% once it's over, I think 5. And so margins increase even if you give them a discount.
Yeah, no, it's good stuff. B2B on Amazon is still pretty underrated.
Anything else on recession-proofing business?
No, I think I'm good.
Awesome. All right. So, Pat, you recently shared Who's Got to Win team motivation exercise. How has this helped your team, and do you recommend this practice to others?
This is, okay, so we're sort of shifting into management. I recently attended a sales training session, and this guy, he's a professional sales trainer. Basically, he helps salespeople perform better, and he starts every session by saying, okay, who's got to win? Who's got to win from this week? And remember, no win is too small. And I was sitting there like, oh my gosh, like, let's just get down to business here. Like this is some wishful thinking, hugs and rainbows kind of stuff. I'm not into this. But then I saw as he went around and people started listing their wins for the week, they would sort of perk up and they would get into this mental state that was a little bit shifted from how they came in. And admittedly, it brought my mood up a little bit too. And so reluctantly, I was like, all right, I guess this is okay after all. And then I looked it up afterwards. And if you look at the work of like a Tony Robbins or something like that, you'll see that they're big on priming, which is like a change in mental state that you basically force upon yourself. You can change your posture, change your breathing, think about certain things that you're grateful for, and this will change the mental state. And it seems a little out there, but I went back to my sales team and I was like, what the heck, why not? A couple days later, I was that guy who's got to win. And remember, no win is too small. Let's see what you can do. And initially, people are going to be really resistant, like I was. They're like, this is dumb. This is, I don't have a win big enough worth celebrating, whatever. But then with me and my team, the first person said a win and they felt good about that. Somebody else wanted to show them up a little bit, told them something else, and it did. And it snowballed and we had an excellent day. So yes, reluctantly, I am here to report that priming with teams does appear to work. And this could be, this could be anything. The first couple times you do it, people are not going to be used to it and they're going to be reluctant like I was. But over time, they will learn to, I think, enjoy calling out these moments. And I think it just returns your brain to the initial state where you were when you were victorious at doing something specific. And so you'll then re-enter that zone and you'll perform like that for the rest of the day, week, month, whatever. Should be done pretty frequently though, I think. Yeah, so I thought that was just a cool thing for Amazon sellers working with teams. If you got someone working the ads or working the listings or, answering buyer seller messages, like, whatever it is, product sourcing, whatever it is, just, in that quick huddle, you could change their outlook for the whole day. I think that's important.
I like that. And it's definitely something that David and I, we practice every week with our team. I think what I've seen, especially if you have a fully remote team, I think a lot of entrepreneurs and e-commerce especially, I know, Pat, you guys have, maybe an office, but maybe some remote. Our team is fully remote. And so bringing everybody together and then kind of sharing some wins so you get to hear about what someone else in another department's been doing all week or their major win for the week. And it kind of like, oh, wow, that's kind of cool. I haven't seen them all week, or maybe I've seen them in a meeting or two, but they've had this huge win. And so it's just like a series of wins that kind of builds everybody up. And so I'm a huge fan of that.
I didn't think it would work. It's simple, but it works. There's a saying I've been trying to implement recently. It's if it looks stupid, but it works, it ain't stupid.
I think it's especially important, maybe even more important with virtual workforce, because oftentimes you don't have like the chatter by when you're getting coffee or on the elevator or whatever. And so I find myself liking to have that. We do it at our Friday meeting, our team meeting, and I look forward to that. And it was funny, we skipped a Friday meeting last week and I got my hair cut, and I was just telling the person cutting my hair all about my week. I was basically sharing my wins, and I realized like, oh, you need this. Like this is part this. And at the end of it, she's like, man, it sounds like you're having a pretty good day. And I'm like, yeah, I am. I think it's important to have that. So no, good stuff.
Yeah. I was in the mindset that, we got to attack problems. Let's talk about problems so that we can fix them. It's still constructive in nature, but I was totally missing that, you can change state by recalling some things.
So I got one more question one more topic to discuss before the fire round. And so this is something where, Pat, you shared with us last time you were on the podcast that you'd been training jiu-jitsu. And you've noticed, I wanted to kind of chat about, like, have you noticed like connections between e-commerce or marketing and jiu-jitsu, and kind of talk about that? I think David and I have shared on the podcast before that we also train jiu-jitsu. And so there must be something like going on there. So what do you think?
So I'm a white belt. I'm just getting started. I've been at it for about a year. So, we'll chat again, episode 300, 350, whatever, however long it's going to take to get some color changes here. But yeah, no, I started it and at first I hated it because you just beat up so badly without any awareness of the sport at all. You just get annihilated. And on my first day, I'm a little bit of a bigger guy, so I didn't get any mercy whatsoever. And I think I was also like tensing up a lot. I was really resistant. I was just sort of this wouldn't flow roll at all, which is like I wouldn't take it easy. I was just showed no mercy, got beat up a ton, and only now maybe I understand a few words of this language, but barely. Right? But yeah, the one interesting thing that I sort of have observed from and for folks who are unfamiliar, I mean, this is a grappling sport. If you've ever seen the UFC and the part where they're sort of rolling around on the ground in a mangled sort of mess, and they're trying to get either a choke or a limb, there's potentially an arm break, something like that. That's what we're talking about here. Do you guys do gi or no gi?
No gi.
So yeah, it's either in the pajamas, it's in the bathrobe, or it's not. It's in regular people clothes. They're just maybe a bit tight. Yeah. So there's a saying in jiu-jitsu somebody taught me early on, which is like position before submission, which means that you have to be in an advantageous position in order to finish the fight, and you have to work your way up to that point incrementally. You can't just instantly, unless you can't, flying arm bars and whatever, they aren't common, so you don't be doing that stuff, but you got to work your way up to a position where you can sort of win the encounter. And I realized that there are some similarities between that and being a marketer in the sense that you can't, people often don't buy, not going to buy right on the spot. That instantaneous event doesn't happen. You sort of need to build what people would call in marketing a funnel, right? So you walk them through step by step by step with increasing sort of advancing steps to the purchase event. And so I'm sort of starting to visualize a jiu-jitsu like funnel where it's like, start on the feet, get some ties, do a takedown, whatever, get the person down, pass guard, get to an advantageous position, and go for the submission. And the same thing is like, if you see an AIDA, like an ADA awareness funnel, it's like, they know about the brand at first, and then you get an email address, and then, you communicate by email, you run a sale, and you get the purchase. It's a strange pair. I'm not quite sure what to do with this concept yet, but it's just something I've sort of started to notice. And there's a bunch of other kind of life lessons that I'm starting to absorb, but it's, again, we'll talk again later.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept. It's kind of like you're given kind of a roadmap in terms of like jiu-jitsu. You're given a roadmap of all of these moves and sequences. Like you said, you're starting to stand up, take them to the ground, and the same thing with, marketing and other stuff. You're given a roadmap, and then you're kind of set free to go execute that roadmap. And then along the way, shit happens and something goes sideways. And then I think it's the, entrepreneurs, like, we're gritty, right? Like, we don't give up and we like problem solve. And so I think like both of those, like for me, it's like, you're problem solving, if someone has their arm around your neck and they're trying to kill you, you need to problem solve that, or there's not a good alternative to that. And then the same thing with your marketing, if you're wasting a ton of money or something's not working out, you need to solve that problem to get to the next step. And so I definitely kind of see that parallel there.
year one of jiu-jitsu and year one of running a business is not dissimilar. Yeah. Year one of jiu-jitsu, you're getting choked out 20 times a practice. And year one of business, man, I mean, it's just full of failures, and it's a feedback loop though, right? You're like, oh, that didn't work. I'm going to do this differently. And like, if you can kind of adopt that same mindset, I think it works in jiu-jitsu and in business, because the people that go to practice one and get choked out 20 times and never come back, like I would argue they probably won't be great at running a business even.
You can't start a Shopify store. Look at
yeah.
On this topic, which is a super niche topic about leverage, right? Like in jiu-jitsu, there's an older gentleman at our gym. He's a black belt. He's great, but he's getting on in years, but he's still so excellent at the sport because he understands leverage and body mechanics. And he's not stronger. He's not stronger than a 30-year-old weightlifter, power lifter. He's not stronger than that person, but he's still better because he understands leverage. Like, so he knows jiu-jitsu is one of those things where it's not just a brute force thing, right? And so I think in businesses, seems to be the same way, right? Or you can get a lot of leverage from, say, media, for example. Like a low leverage activity, you could go down to town square and hand out Amazon coupons for your product, right? Or you could get online, you could build a media presence with leverage, you could leverage influencers or whatever. You could do a more high leverage play with the same amount of effort. And so I think that's another similarity that I'm starting to notice.
So I think it's super niche, but very interesting. And I've got a couple of other friends in the e-commerce space that also train jiu-jitsu, and I'm kind of like, there's something there. It's like overcoming adversity, solving problems. We face that, on the day to day, and some of the other benefits for anybody listening that's never trained jiu-jitsu is like, it's a e-commerce entrepreneur marketing. It's a lonely life. We're grinding away all day and at a keyboard, and so it's a great way to like exercise. Also, I found that a lot of people that I've met on the mats training they're like really good people, and it's just a great outlet to go out and take out some aggression or just have a good workout and meet some people and enjoy your time. So I enjoy it. So maybe on episode 350, we'll have you back on, Pat, and revisit. Anything else we want to cover before we get into the fire round?
No, let's get into it. I forgot we still have the fire round.
This is your third fire round, Pat. Are you ready?
Ready.
All right. What is your favorite book?
I am liking the Secrets trilogy by Russell Brunson right now. He's the founder of ClickFunnels.
Awesome. What are your hobbies?
It's all been jiu-jitsu and some weightlifting.
What is one thing that you do not miss about working for the man?
Set schedules. I figured out I like to work very late at night, and so for the night owls and the early folk, just get to set that timing, and it's awesome.
Last one. What do you think sets apart successful entrepreneurs from those who give up, fail, or never get started?
I think it's get knocked down 7 times, get up 8. Like over a long enough period of time, you will be successful as long as you keep persevering and intelligently improving and refining the approach. It's a do more of what's working. Like, this is something I'm really trying to implement. Just do more of what's working, even if you have 1 sale from ads, right? 1 sale from ads can become 3 sales from ads, can become 10 sales. And, so just take an incremental approach. Yeah, you can't fail if you don't quit.
David, over to you to close out the show.
So Pat, two follow-up questions to our listeners that are ready to take their PPC to the next level and work with your team of professionals. What would be the best way to get in touch?
Well, I wrote a free 40-page book with all of our secrets in it, and we're just being super public with it. So even if you wanted to take all of our stuff and implement it yourself, you can do that. That's at asteroidx.com/action-plan. And if you did want to get a custom strategy for the business, we're just also at asteroidx.com.
Awesome. We'll post a link to that in the show notes. And Pat, you've been putting out some awesome content on YouTube. Where can people find you?
I think just YouTube, my name, Pat Space Lum, and it should come up.
Well, we will post a link to that as well. Pat, want to thank you for being a guest on the Firing the Man podcast, and looking forward to having you back on again.
Thanks, sir. See you guys soon.
All right. See you, Pat. Before you go, we wanted to share a new service that Ken and I have been using called Getita that has made us over $10,000 in Amazon reimbursements. The service requires no monthly subscription, and Getita collects a small percentage of the money they recover for you. It takes less than 5 minutes to set up and works on all Amazon marketplaces. Go to Getita.com, Getida.com, and enter promo code FTM400. That's FTM for Firing the Man 400 to get your first $400 in reimbursements commission free. How much money does Amazon owe you?